Next, we're going to talk to Linda Halliday about victims of sexual abuse after the break. Linda Halliday, sometime newspaper reporter, has become a recognized continent-wide as an authority on sexual abuse, on which she has done a lot to bring it out of the closet. I read her little book called The Silent Scream, The Reality of Sexual Abuse. I found it very difficult to read because my generation just pretends these things don't exist. However, when I got to the facts about the Sexual Abuse Victims Anonymous, which Linda and I think your friend founded.
Yes, I am.
I was astonished to find that in Campbell River, the incidents recognized and tackled of sexual abuse would curl your hair. If it's like that in Campbell River, what in the name of all that's holy is it like in Vancouver? Tell me, Linda, you take it away from me and tell me why you have got this mission working on shoestring budgets to help these kids who go through these horrifying experiences from incest to God knows what.
Well,
Why?
My story is pretty basic to thousands of others. The only difference is that I am dealing with it and I'm speaking out for people that can't speak out. One of the reasons that I started is because I was raped by my father beginning at the age of 6. There were 4 girls in our family, and he was also abusing my older sister. But we never talked about it, because as long as you don't talk about it, it's not happening. It's a lot different than rape by a stranger, because with rape, you never have to see that man again, maybe in court, but that's it. But when you're being sexually abused in the home, you have to get up and you have to have breakfast with the man that abused you the night before. And everything is so damn normal that you look around and you think, that couldn't have happened, it must be a dream. And it makes it easier to cope with. I had been an honor student throughout, never in any trouble, despite a lot of the indicators say watch for problem children. There's also the kids that school becomes a safety, a sanctuary. When a lot of the problem between my sister and I, for instance, my dad, if my mom was away, we would hear him coming in our room, and I learned to snore really well, so I would pretend I was asleep. That way he would leave me alone and he'd take my sister. But then I would lay there and I would know what was happening to her, and I would feel guilty because I had been responsible for her being abused because I pretended to be asleep. If I did it the other way around and became the martyr for the evening and sacrificed myself, then I hated her with a passion for not appreciating what I was doing for her, even though we never talked about it. So you can see the conflict within the family itself. By the time I was 13, I was dating. I had never told anyone what was going on at home. There was no alcohol or drugs, nothing like that involved at that time with anybody in our family. What I ended up doing was I was pregnant and I wasn't sure if it was my dad's or my boyfriend's.
Oh my God.
So I told him what was happening at home, and he told me we had to report it to the police. We came to Vancouver, I went to the police, and we all know incest was not happening 20 years ago. So the police at that time, I call it grilling, they questioned me from anywhere from 2 to 4 hours. Why
are you making up the story?
That was it. Why are you trying to get your dad in trouble? Why are you doing this? No, what is he doing to you? I told them it was happening with my older sister, but she would say it wasn't because I would have in her position. They then phoned my parents and told them the charge I laid. They then sent me home on the bus. And they didn't tell me about social workers. I didn't know anything about what the social worker does. I was also told I couldn't see my boyfriend because he was older and could be charged with contributing. I went to my grandmother's here in Vancouver. My grandparents lived 10 blocks apart. I met my sister. She had just been released from questioning. She slapped me across the face and called me a few names. I then went to my dad's mom's home, and I can remember saying, "It's true, I didn't lie." And she said, "I know," and she hid me in the basement for approximately 2 weeks because my parents wanted to kill me. Now, the only thing I remember during that 2-week period is my grandfather shouting he'd kill me if he could get his hands on me. And that was ironic because he had been molesting me approximately 3 years by that time.
Your father or your grandfather?
My grandfather. So it's my father's father.
Well, that was 2 people.
Yes, that isn't uncommon at all. The majority of people I deal with have at least 2 offenders. I then agreed that I would drop charges and apologize to my father. That way they would welcome me back in the family. At 13, pregnant and in isolation, you will do anything rather than lose your family.
Did you have the baby?
No, I miscarried shortly after, but I went up to my father's room and he was laying there. He looked old, he looked sick, he was crying, and I felt totally responsible. What have I done to my dad? And I went in and I knelt beside him and I apologized for telling. He cried and he swore it would never happen again, and I totally believed him, totally. My mother then didn't want us around, the 4 girls, and left us with my grandmother here in Vancouver. Now, up to that point, I had been an honor student and never in trouble. I had a miscarriage. The sisters began things like, if it wasn't for you, we could be home. You're a tramp, all this kind of stuff. So I thought, fine, I'll show you how bad I can be. So for the next 1.5 years, I was prostituting here in Vancouver. I was also teaching Sunday school faithfully every Sunday, and that kind of made up for what was happening, and attending school regularly. I got caught for shoplifting in Vancouver, and I was put in juvenile detention center. I was pregnant again, no idea whose it was, and I lipped off to one of the guards. They put me in a room called isolation in the juvenile center, and during the night one of the male guards came up and I was very badly beaten. I started to miscarry and he got scared. He cut me with a knife and told me if I opened my mouth, he'd be back. And you better believe I didn't open my mouth. The matron saw me the next day, didn't ask any questions. She...
Yale Street.
I think it was.
Yeah.
It's the juvenile center here in Vancouver. I then learned to get a little tougher and to smarten up about lipping guards back who have keys. I then went back on the street. The last day of school, my mother had laid a charge of incorrigibility against me, and I was put back in the center. By then I was 15. I then went into the juvenile center again. The judge decided it would be in my best interest to send me back home. I was sent back to my mother and father, and within a week, 2 weeks, Dad started the abuse again. By then I really didn't care anymore. At 15, I met this man, quite a bit older than myself, and believe me, he comes from a Walton family existence, the farm, the 8 kids, and I married into that family at age 16. Even then, my problems should have stopped and I lived happily ever after. But there was the suicide attempts, the breakdowns.
Yours?
Mine. I did a lot of running around, 5 years on Valium. I closed beer parlors down. My last suicide attempt was approximately 6 years ago. And my son was in the car. I smashed up my car. And it was then I realized that, hey, yeah, I had been sexually abused, but I wasn't being anymore. And anytime I did anything wrong, it was a great cop-out. Well, I've been sexually abused, what do you expect? So I always had an excuse for my bad behavior. So when I started looking at, I had to start taking some responsibility for what's happening now. That's when I started to come to terms with it. 3, I started talking to professionals quietly and finding out what was available for sexual abuse victims. I had no idea the extent of the problem when I started. I am really shocked.
Are you now married?
I'm still married.
Happily married?
20 years.
To the Waltons?
To the Waltons.
Yeah.
My husband's a terrific guy. He's been, in my book, I call him my anchor to sanity. And my kids are terrific. I have an 18-year-old daughter and a 19-year-old son. And my daughter, in fact, has been my secretary for 2 years.
Now we'll come to SAVA, Sexual Abuse Victims Anonymous, and what Linda has achieved. It's quite astonishing when I know how it's been pushed into the closet for all these years. After the break. A survivor of incest. That would be the right way to describe Linda Halliday, wouldn't it? How many kids, youngsters who go through this ghastly experience survive? Normally, without being affected?
Well,
none?
Oh yeah. People have for years said if you've been sexually abused, you're devastated for life. When I was watching television shows about sexual abuse and looking for help, I would see these weeping women crying in therapy for 11 years and still alone at the end of it. What I want to prove to people and to the victims out there is you don't have to be devastated for life.
Yeah.
Now these kids, they don't have to be. If the sexual abuse is acknowledged and dealt with, those kids can come out fine.
That's if you're a Linda Halliday.
No. These,
Yes.
I talk to 5- and 6-year-olds, and we're delighted to get the kids that young because they stand a chance of having no really serious hang-ups as adults. I didn't have that chance.
All right, let's have S.A.V.A. Tell me about S.A.V.A.
SAVA started in October of 1981, and I had been 6 years planning what I was going to do. And I based it on the AA program to begin with. It's expanded unbelievably.
Sexual Abuse Victims Anonymous. How do you get 5- and 6-year-old children into it? How do you know about the incest that's going on? How can you find out? What is your record in bringing cases out in public?
Okay, in the 8 years before SAVA came into existence, there was one family-related sexual offense in the Campbell River courts. In the last 3 years, there's been 75 charges, 50 have been totally processed, and we have a 78% conviction rate. We have cases before the court now. We have a mother being charged. It's not just men. There are women that are offenders as well. And we have a mother right now that's being charged in Campbell River for sexually abusing her 6- and 7-year-old sons. Now, she's coming up for sentencing February 13th, and that will be interesting to see what they do.
We'll talk about the sentencing in a little while, but how do you get into the picture? Are these 79 cases, did you say 79 cases, how many cases?
75 charges.
75 charges. How do you get involved in the 75 charges? And what kind of reaction do you get from the police and the authorities?
Excellent. The police have been tremendous with us. We work basically with Crown Counsel, police, and ourselves. Our Crown does not hesitate to prosecute. We've had kids on the stand 5 years old, and they call it going on stage. If the children are prepared properly, they have their day in court, and they come out of it recovering much quicker than the kids that never have their day in court. Mothers phone us and say, hey, is it normal for a 27-year-old man to be playing doctor with my 5-year-old son? That's how we get involved. We're in the schools. I go in and I talk to preschoolers. We've never had a complaint from a parent. We go into the high schools. We talk to brownie groups. Anybody that will listen to me,
What do you tell them?
I tell them the realities of sexual abuse first to the parents. Why it's important for their kid to know. 1 out of every 4 females is sexually abused before 16. 1 out of every 10 males is sexually abused before 16. The latest studies show that 1 out of every 10 families will be affected by sexual assault sometime in their life.
And most of it will be buried, hidden, and forgotten about.
Well, if you have a sex offender in your neighborhood, everybody's ready to kill him.
Right.
You get that same sex offender in the family, and everybody, oh, well, he's sick. We've got to help him. Incest is a crime, and this society has to start recognizing it's not a family problem. We're very strong on prosecution. The sexual part of it, if the offender just wanted sex, there's lots of it out there. But what he's looking for is power and control. And what better way to get it than over a small child that loves and adores him and isn't going to reject him?
What about the proof? When you're dealing with a 5-year-old, I see here the highest single age at risk for girls was 8 years old, and for male risk about 12, right?
Yes. 6 to 8 years old is high risk for females. A lot of our complaints, they will come in through mothers or through a neighbor. Ministry of Human Resources sometimes refers them. RCMP refer them. We get them from all over. The kids don't lie about it.
Are there cases where children don't realize it is sexual abuse?
They know something's wrong, but they're not sure what it is. My youngest one that I've interviewed for RCMP, we have the dolls with all the parts. And I have been called down to Nanaimo RCMP on 2 occasions to do a video with the dolls. One occasion it was 2 3-year-old girls who couldn't explain what had happened to them. The other, just last week, was a 2.5-year-old boy. And they show you with the dolls, and there's no way those kids could know unless it had happened to them.
In other words, a 2.5-year-old responded
Yes.
to the descriptions given to him on the doll.
We handed him the doll and we did some role playing. Okay, this is you and this is the man that's suspected. Let's play that he's babysitting you, because that was the kind of situation it was in. And he very clearly indicated that something had gone on. We don't have enough evidence to prosecute.
No.
But we have had a 9-year-old boy sworn in court and a man convicted. We've had an 11-year-old girl sworn in. These things can happen. I've seen tremendous changes in Campbell River, and if we can change the system there, then you can do it anywhere.
Is it mostly fathers who are, the majority of offences against family members will be done by fathers, I should imagine?
The highest offender is the natural father, but the highest offender charged is the stepfather.
Aha.
So there's the difference.
He's one step removed and thinks he's home
And there's
free.
also, generally, a lot of times there's generational abuse. Like the grandfather will abuse his kids and those kids will abuse their kids. That isn't uncommon at all.
Give me that figure again. 1 in 4 girls will be sexually abused by the age of what?
16.
By the age of 16. It's a tough one, isn't it?
And I think people have to recognize, too, that the more people that keep the secret, the more people that are going to be abused. Women that are abused as children tend to gravitate towards men that will in turn abuse them as adults and abuse their children. Men that have been abused, many of them become abusers, only if it isn't dealt with. And I really stress that, because we have people out there, say a man that was abused when he was a kid and he's going, oh my God, I'm going to become an abuser. It doesn't have to be that way. They can break the cycle, and that's what we're trying to do.
Now, you've spoken to judges, a
Yes,
number
I
of
have.
judges' conventions with some considerable effect. What do you tell the judges about the punishment that should follow for proven cases of incest? Well, we're largely talking about incest is the worst problem, is it not? If there's an outsider involved, that's a straight criminal offence, you might say,
Yeah.
which incest is too. But the family, therefore, the normal family, am I calling the others abnormal? Of course I am. A normal family would act against an outsider.
Oh yes, definitely.
And that's not the same problem.
And
You see,
that's okay. Well, how we define sexual abuse is any trust relationship between an adult and child that is broken by fondling, molesting, intercourse, or exposure. Now that's our definition. The trust relationship's very important. Now, what we have found, when I talk to the judges, I give them the victim's perspective. I read them writings from victims.
Would you like to have seen your father go to jail for 20 years?
I don't know. I still love my father.
What do you tell the judges that what the sentencing policy
I tell them,
should
number
be?
one, that there is no cure for sex offenders, and they should recognize that.
Lock them up and throw away the key?
There's treatment. I don't know what the answer for offenders is, but I do know they're not getting long enough jail sentences. For instance, there's a sex offenders unit here out in Abbotsford. Now, the program there is intensive therapy for 18 to 24 months. Most of our sex offenders aren't getting sentences nearly long enough. They tell me they have an 80% success rate. Yes, they do, but only 1 out of every 10 men that are sentenced there or go into the program ever complete it. So that's 80% success rate of 1 out of 10. Now, there's
Mind
no
you,
follow-up.
We've interviewed rapists in the maximum security prisons who say, I don't get any treatment. As soon as I get out, I'll rape again.
Because they aren't ordered into the treatment, they can go voluntarily. And if the treatment gets tough, they can get out of the treatment. They need I think you call it
Indeterminate sentences.
Definitely.
Is Campbell River the only place that has an effective organization for dealing with victims of incest?
There are other self-help groups starting, but what's different about SAVA is we liaison, we do prevention, we do speaking.
How many are there of you?
In the last 3 years, we have seen well over 360 clients.
But how many are there of you in SAVA?
There's myself and my partner, Sheila Sapers, my daughter, and one other office staff, Elaine. So there's 4 of us.
3 of you have educated the 22,000 people who live in and around Campbell River.
I've only had my partner for 6 months. She's tremendous.
Linda Halliday, quite an astonishing tale of her experiences and successes. After the break. Hold on, I'll use you. Now, yourself, your new associate, what's her name?
Sheila Sapers.
And your daughter.
Yes, and there's one other office member.
And because of your influence in the Campbell River area, you've brought 79 cases out the closet.
75.
75 cases out the closet.
Well, that's charges. We've brought over 360.
360 cases out the closet altogether.
And I have to stress, all the offenders of these victims don't live in Campbell River.
No.
They're from all over the place. Maybe the victim lives in Campbell River now, or maybe it's happened in Campbell.
All right, where do you get the money?
The Vancouver Foundation gave us, they had enough faith in us, and they gave us a 3-year decreasing grant. Our last year is now. We have been operating on community support, and like Rotary Club has been very good to us. We operate mainly on donations. This year, for the first time, we received government money, federal. We have been turned down by every department. Grace McCarthy's latest comment to me thanks me for my commendable interest. The Attorney General's office turned us down for the Rape Assault Center money because they said we didn't fit their criteria. Attorney General's office told us that we didn't fit the criteria because we dealt primarily with children. Human Resources told us we didn't fit their criteria because we deal primarily with adults. So everybody has been passing the buck. January of this year, we did get a grant under the Community Development Project, an 8-week grant, and then we got an 8-week extension. We then got a grant under the Community Recovery Program, and they have all kinds of stipulations, which meant we had to let some of our staff go and retrain. We then received that, ran out, and we're now on a Canada Works project. We don't think it's going to be renewed.
You'll be spending half your time looking for money to run the operation.
I am.
How much do you need to run the operation a year?
We need at least $2,000 a month. That's without wages. And we operate month to month right now. We've had excellent support from the community. United Way has given us some money, but it's very minimal. And Campbell River community is getting a little tired of supporting us, not because they don't like our work, but because we have people coming from all over Canada and the States asking for our help.
And Campbell River City Council actually paid your plane fare for a television appearance in New York.
They reimbursed me, yes.
Reimbursed you?
Yes, they did.
So they appreciate the value of the work.
They have been just superb.
And when do you run out of money?
At the end of January, we're finished.
Which government departments have turned you down? Grace turned you down because it was commendable. Come on. Brian Smith turned you down as Attorney General.
That was when Alan Williams was in.
Alan Williams turned you down because it was...
Yes. The health directorate here told us last year they wrote us and said, this year we are not focusing on child abuse, we are focusing on wellness, which I'm told is the opposite of sickness. They sent us another letter, and they did not sign it yours truly. It was signed Wellness Wishes.
Who signed it?
Margot Sanderson was the name.
Who is she?
She's with the health directorate here.
Provincial?
I think that's federal.
Federal.
I also have a letter from the regional manager for Ministry of Human Resources that 2 years ago told me that they did not need my expertise in Region 10, which is Duncan North. We have never been paid by Human Resources for the work we've done, yet they refer to us. And we also have 2 workers that have asked us if we would give them a month's training. And yet we are not recognized financially by any government. We have a proposal in right now with welfare grants in Ottawa, and we are told, we're hoping it'll go through, and it's a 3-year grant for research. Originally we were told that we had to prove the need, we had to show community support, and we had to prove it was workable.
You've done all that.
We did all that. We are now told, because we've been in operation for 3 years, we are no longer eligible for new money.
Fair enough, that's enough of that misery. Wellness wishes to you in your search for money. Have you leaned on Jack Austin?
Yes, he's well aware of us.
He's the guy to lean on, you know.
Ray Skelly has been just tremendous. He's our MP. He has fought for us right through.
But no money.
Well, he's been, I think, partially responsible for getting federal funding so far. This year, we've only been out of money 2 weeks, which is a real record for us.
You see, I'll tell you why they resent you. It's not because of what you do, but because you're not out of the normal feminist mold. Sometimes appears in this program, and even I looked at them with kind of suspicious eyes. Do you know what I'm trying to say?
Yes,
Remember
I
the
do.
big fuss about rape relief and all the rest of it in
Yes.
Vancouver, where the government very properly, I think, stepped in and said you're not spending the money according to the guidelines.
Right.
They're not putting you in the same category, are they?
They don't know what to do with me, basically. If I walked in with 2 heads and horns, they'd be delighted. They could deal with that. But I am so average. I could be their neighbor. I could be working with
And
them,
you're so
and that
square.
bothers
You
them.
frighten them.
Yes, I'm establishment, basically.
Yeah. Jeez, where am I going? Go ahead.
Yes, good morning, Jack.
Morning.
First-time caller. I'm a 55-year-old single woman who spent 28 years in the convent, and I left the order 7 years ago, became an addiction counselor, been working 9 years with women, and just in the last 2 years, the incest topic was addressed, and I, as a counselor, came to contact with that for the first time.
What do you think of Linda's work?
I think Linda's work is tremendous, and I am going to do all I can to promote her cause and continue working on that myself. I've been through therapy now in the last while. I quit my job at counseling because I had to deal with the emotional backlog.
Well, that's fair enough, ma'am. You might be of some help to Linda, who knows?
Will be, because I'm a very educated...
All right, hold on and we'll take your number. Go ahead, please. Go ahead, please.
Hello?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, it's so nice to hear Linda talk out so openly. This happened to me, but it wasn't with any of my parents. It was my brother-in-law. And I was only about 6, 7 years. I went to the police. I ran to the police station, actually, and the police said, oh, just another cock and bull story sort of style. You know, you're lying. You must go to church and confess all your sins. It's so pathetic, you know, when you're a little girl or even a little boy, who's going to believe you? I mean, this happened 40, 45 years ago. I get frightened at times when, you know, even my husband and I, you know, when we're making love, I can see this brother-in-law. I would just wish I could get it. Somebody would take it away from me. But thank you so much, Linda. God be with you.
Thank you. I'd really like that lady to write to me.
Hey, give the address. Who's up? Put up again. SAVA, R1 Campbell River, BC, The Silent Scream. What does the book cost?
The book is $5.
$5.
Yes.
Go ahead, please. No, don't go ahead. Hold on. I'll be back after the break. Well, I don't know how I've missed you all these years, but I'm glad I found you.
Thank you.
The mothers always know.
Not always. After a disclosure, like when the kid says, Mom, Dad's been abusing me, quite often Mom will say, I should have known there was this, this, and this, but she just didn't want to believe
The
it.
mothers close an eye to it sometimes for the sake of fear, because
Definitely.
of fear.
And our whole system is geared so that people are discouraged from laying charges. Lawyers, for instance, will say, well, do you really want this out in public? Psychiatrists will say, well, obviously you didn't keep him happy in bed. So the mother is laid a real guilt trip on her. 87% of all mothers of victims have been sexually abused themselves as children.
Before I go back to the phones again, something I must ask you. I am basically a redneck, I suppose you would call it, to a certain extent. What do we do with these 12-year-olds, little girl who squats and lifts her skirt in the back of an office down on Denman Street, 12 years of age or something?
Right.
What do we do with them? Because the system now is everybody gaily ignores it. Human resources, the police, the lot, gaily.
That's right.
Surely they must be lifted off the street.
These kids are referred to as, quote, throwaways, and I don't agree with that. If we had a residential treatment house that is run properly, teach these kids living skills, build up their self-esteem, show them what it can be like. Now, we may not totally succeed. They may take off on us for a year or two, but they will know what they can be.
But you wouldn't have it where the Senator Hotel is, would you?
No, it would have to be in a place where they're away from their
You're talking about a
environment.
residential place in a family setting run by squares.
That's right.
Too many of these people. I remember one particular organization of camps. It was Brown Camps. Remember Brown's Camps?
Don't
Well, that
know.
was all run by the avant-garde, the kind of progressive treatment of kiss and cuddle, and it was a disaster in many ways.
These kids, most of these kids don't want to be touched. They don't want to be hugged or anything else. They want to know,
They want a good
how do I
square
make
mother
it?
and father in a residential center where they're treated like human beings.
That's right.
No hope of it, is there? Unless somebody gave you $1 million. Or
I
$2
don't
million
intend to give up. There's no way. I don't care if the government keeps fighting us. I intend to keep speaking, and I'm not going away. There's too many kids out there.
But you agree the kids should be lifted off the streets.
Yes?
Why is nobody lifting them now? No place to put them. You don't want to put them in Yale Street in the old detention
No.
center where you went through your horrifying experiences?
No.
A prison is not the answer.
No, it isn't. And 80% of our juvenile centers have kids that are in there that were sexually abused at home. 78% of the prostitutes were abused at home before they ever hit the streets.
Go ahead, please.
Yes, my sister's girlfriend, who is about 15, her stepfather is raping her, and we don't know what to do for her. What would you do for a girl like that? How can you help her? How can you get her to go get help?
How old is she?
15.
She's 15.
Okay, the first thing, if she won't go in and talk to Human Resources or the crisis line or the police herself, then you should report it. If you don't, you're not doing her any favor.
You report it to the police?
Police or Human Resources, whichever she's more comfortable with. There's also an organization in town called SAVA.
Sarah?
It's Sexual Assault Recovery Anonymous, which we helped set up. It's different than ours in quite a few ways, but phone them. They're listed in the phone book.
Okay,
And the woman there is named Joy. Ask to speak to her.
sounds good.
How long has this girl, your friend, been complaining to you about this?
Well, she's been complaining to my sister, and then she talked to my mother about it. It's been happening for about 4 years.
So since she was 11.
Yeah.
Also, I think people should understand that you are under obligation to report any suspicion or sexual abuse, even if you suspect it. If you don't, you can be liable to a $2,000 fine.
But you get an anonymity when you report it.
Yes, you can phone the helpline and report it, and you don't have to give your name.
Yes.
You're talking about the McCarthy's helpline.
Yes.
Okay. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Kamloops, go ahead, please.
Hello, I'm calling in. I've never been sexually abused myself, but I remember being a young person and having people that I admired that I had sexual feelings for. Now, this is a psychological problem that I couldn't talk to my parents about it because I wasn't really aware of what the feelings meant. But is there not sometimes a problem with the child? Where is there some way that you can find out?
Good question. Is the child ever to blame?
I don't believe that a child is to blame. The adult is the adult and therefore responsible for protecting children. Now, if a child has been programmed or sexually abused for a number of years, say they have been abused by 2 or 3 people growing up, by the time they're 10 years old, that's the only way they know how to relate. So they will come on to, say, a foster parent sexually, not wanting the sex, wanting to see if you're different.
Yeah.
They want protection. They don't want sex. They're children.
Go ahead, please.
Yes, I know a lot of these throwaways that the lady is now talking about, and I just get so angry with society and the people around these throwaways that figure that they're bad children. And I know they're not. I went through a lot of that pain with them, and it's so refreshing to see somebody who cares and somebody who sees through what's going on, because they need love more than they need a lecture and the you do this and do that and don't do that, you're bad.
Okay. It's a
I
good
want to
comment,
thank
isn't
you
it?
for
Yes.
that, and I hope you make it.
Thank
will.
you. Go ahead, please.
Yes, good morning, Jack. Good morning, Linda.
Good morning.
I'd like to commend you on your work, and I feel more people should get involved, and the government, I think, should get a lot more involved in what they're doing. And I would like to volunteer my time, if I could. Yes, I live in Vancouver.
You've got my address. They've been flashing it on. Just write to me.
Okay.
Okay?
SAVA or, SAVA, RR1 Campbell River. There it is up there again. Do you need money?
Oh, yes. We have had a donation, a $500 donation from a church down here. We have also had donations from different organizations. A real estate company from Courtney donated to us. We do need money to keep our work going,
Well,
definitely.
you came very
and
well.
we are tax deductible.
Yeah, you came very well recommended to me indeed, so I would endorse donations to SAVA, which is most unusual. Uh-oh, gone. Go ahead, please. That's you.
Hello?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to say that, hello?
Yes?
Yes.
I just want to say that I'm really happy that such an organization is getting something to do with the media, because it's about time. My wife has been involved when she's 6 years old, and it was only at the age of 16 her mother finally gave some sort of recognition. I don't know if you can call it good recognition. She was pregnant by this man, her father, and she was sent on to YMCA for a month and then given a one-way ticket to Vancouver. She arrived here in 1978. I met her in 79, and it's been a nightmare for her and I trying to unravel this.
Yeah.
We started to go through SARA, but it got very difficult for her to be able to cope with a group openness,
Yeah.
because the memories came, and our weeks and weeks after were unbelievable. Going through the government so-called organizations that I, for 17 years, paid taxes for. You know what we received? We went from psychiatrist to psychiatrist to psychologist to medication to more medication.
Yeah.
And she still doesn't feel ready that she can go to SARA. She doesn't know who to reach for.
There.
She had to abort that child.
Well, you've got...
Another child that she had to abort afterwards. She has finally, this year, after all these years, finally got her mother to call long distance and say, you weren't the guilty party.
Okay, hold on, don't go away. But time is after the break. If you want to read a shocker, buy Linda Halliday's book, $5.95. You've got the address, RR1 Campbell River. The book's The Silent Scream. She'll be back again soon. Send a donation if you can. Tomorrow, we're going to tackle the university students' organizations, and we're going to talk to the ineffable Barbara Mill, editor of the Toronto Sun, but who knows what else. Are these people entitled to victims' compensation? Yes.
Yes.
I'll be back tomorrow at 9 a.m. precisely.